Let's take a look at some charts on Zcash for this week's article on Brave New Coin. So looking at Zcash compared to other coins with privacy capabilities of varying degrees, whether it be default privacy in Monero and Grin, or optional privacy like Dash, Zcash, DCR, Pivx. I'm going to group those all together, looking at these metrics. Zcash is in the yellow here, pretty much in the middle of everything except daily transaction volume. I don't know why this is so high on this chain. Same with Neo. I don't know why Neo's daily transaction volume is so high. So if you know, let me know. If you look at Monero and Grin, we don't have values for daily transaction volume or active addresses because privacy is default. Looking at the inflation rates compared to everything else, this is Zcash in the brown here, and this is Grin. So other than Grin, Zcash has the highest inflation rate compared to everything else. So it's going to be really hard to convince anybody to hold this long term at a 60% inflation rate. You're just constantly being devalued in the hopes that the founder's reward will pay off innovation or word of mouth marketing. Who knows? I think it's a bit absurd that the inflation is still this high. I don't actually know what it's going to be post block reward halving. With all the facts and figures on the developer fund, 20%, it's still too high. Sorry, guys. If you look at DCR, if you look at Dash, anything else with a treasury, that's around 10% of the block reward. So for Zcash to double it and somehow convince people that that's okay to hold, and they have all this stuff going on, all these people, I get it. I have friends who work for Zcash, but just looking at the numbers doesn't convince me to buy anything. This is how the rewards are going to be distributed post-November, post-halving, block 1 million, something. Miners look at 80%, and then ECC, Zcash Foundation, and grants determined by the ECC, I believe. Maybe it's decentralized grant determination, but in any event, they're trying to decentralize, trying to get off the teat of the block reward tax to support development. I'm actually on their side as far as using the block reward to fund the coin development. I just think it's a little too high. I think 20% is too high. I think 10% is where it should be. This is transactions and shielded transactions. So again, Zeke is optional privacy. So you have to opt in to use the privacy. A lot of people don't know that that's even possible, potentially. On a lot of exchanges, if not all the exchanges, you can't even use this function. It's disabled, which makes me wonder, will an exchange ever opt in for this privacy function for regulatory reasons? I'm going to guess no. The same thing with XMR and Grin. It's like, are these coins ever going to get listed anywhere if for regulatory reasons they're problematic, even though as a user, default privacy is much better than optional privacy. So like 16% of the total transactions are shielded, very minimal on the chain. This is transactions per day and average transaction values. For the most part, transactions per day has really ranged on like multi-year lows, 2017 levels. Hasn't really been too exciting. It has kind of picked up since January. It's kind of ranged just in this level, but it's on the top side of that range now. And average transaction values are coming down as transactions per day is increasing, which is what you typically see. I don't know what this is about, honestly. It looks a bit insane and non-organic. So I don't know what's going on there. But you typically don't see sustained levels of average transaction values in the 20,000s or something like that on a chain with no transactions. It's just weird. But the transactions per day does look pretty bullish for any coin in a vacuum. This is block size and transaction fees. So block size in the line here, fees in the fill. Fees are basically at all-time lows, which is great. If you keep in mind that transactions per day is also pretty low, that's part of it. The other part of it is the upgrades that they've had, sapling, blossom, whatever other flowery upgrade you want to call it, has increased scalability. So from that point of view, it's done well. The true test for any coin is when it gets a bunch of transactions. How does it handle that? So if you look at ETH and the Tether stuff, ETH is getting inundated with Tether transactions, and fees have slowly continued to rise. Gas limits have continued to be hit. So that's a scaling conundrum for them. Zcash hasn't had this scaling conundrum just yet because it doesn't have that much activity on the chain. Looking at NVT, which is the line here, and daily active addresses, which is the fill. Daily active addresses at all-time lows, essentially. This is monthly active addresses, rather. Not something you want to see if you're bullish, certainly. NVT is at the bottom of the historic range. I don't know if this is because of the average transaction values have been so wonky and all over the place. The other part of this is pretty much every coin has had their NVT drop substantially because the price dropped pretty substantially, 60, 70%. So it certainly looks like a buy on the NVT in a vacuum. The monthly active addresses looks like a dead chain to me, something you'd avoid. So a bit of a divergence there as far as what the metrics are telling you. This is MVRV, another inverse metric of economic utility relative to market cap. Basically when the coins were last bought relative to market cap. So again, it hit this, if you treat this as an oscillator, overbought, oversold, it hit this mega oversold territory historically that has been a pretty good buy opportunity. Again, because of the massive drop in price. And it's being lifted out of that now at 0.5, kind of the bottom of the range. So it does look like a buy from that perspective. Is the ASICs available on Zcash? I don't know which other coins use Equihash. I don't think any other coins do. So seeing this profitability this high makes me wonder what the calculation is for this. But this is 4 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity costs. You can see they've had some ASICs actually in 2019. So ASICs in existence have a shelf life but aren't going to die anytime soon as far as ASICs on the chain as a whole. Even though they've messed with difficulty, hash rate has actually stayed pretty steady. You can see ever since October 2019, it's kind of stayed steady. So this tells me there aren't any stealth ASICs in development that are being deployed to the chain. This is probably just existing ASICs turning on and off, or existing ASICs being deployed as it oscillates up here. You can see since the last upgrade, I think it was Blossom, some flower name, difficulty dropped substantially, and hash rate still oscillated, hasn't increased per se since the highs. This is Google Trends. You can see it's just been pinned to the floor for most of 2019, early 2020, still not going anywhere. What you want to see is month over month growth, week over week growth in Google Trends to show some interest in what is Zcash, where do I buy Zcash, how do I use shielded transactions on Zcash, anything like that would get picked up on this Google Trends metric. All right, let's go to technicals. Open interest for Bitfinex, long shorts in the green and the red there, VPVR, volume profile of the visible range. These horizontal bars tells you the volume at the specific price. This is RSI, an oscillator that I use for extreme highs, extreme lows, as well as bullish and bearish divergences, and the 50 and the 200 EMA, red and the green here. Another trend metric to see, are we bullish, are we bearish, using basically a litmus test. Are we above or below the 200-day moving average? So looking at long shorts, shorts went to an all-time high earlier this year, but have since dropped pretty substantially back to the previous range, and longs have just continued to drop over the past year. They hit an all-time high, basically when the price, almost at a price local high here, and then they've just sort of melted with price. So there's nothing crazy here with net long, net short. It's just pretty much status quo, other than longs just decreasing over the past year. VPVR shows pretty heavy resistance between 37 and 67, something like that. It's in this garbly mess of previous price history. So it's going to have to likely consolidate again in that zone to establish a new range, new normal, above 60 or in 60, something like that. It'll be interesting to watch for this in November when their halving happens. if there's some post-halving bump, I don't expect anything immediate. You know, if it is, it's speculation related and not necessarily supply demand related. But leading into 2020 is when I'd watch for Zeke to finally make higher highs. Historically, it just hasn't ever done that. Looking at RSI, there's no bullish or bearish divergences. RSI did hit a mega low, multi-year low. I think this isn't like an all-time low for Bitfinex because it did like spike on a wick to like below 20 or something. But it's definitely a close all-time low on the line graph here. 50 and the 200 cross bearish. Everything's mean reverting back to the 200 at this point. So it's going to range. You know, your trend metrics aren't really going to be too valuable until it stops ranging. So this is, you know, it's above the metrics, but it's kind of trendless. Looking at the cloud, you can see it's basically been below the cloud for the better part of 2 years. You know, I had this mini up with everything in April to July 2019. And then it had this mini up with everything in early 2020. And now it's mean reverting with everything back to 47, which is the 50% of this range high, range low. So above 47 with bullish cloud, you know, bullish cloud twist, bullish TK cross, lagging span, which is this light green, above the cloud, above the price. Then we can say with a little bit of certainty that there's some bull in this one, but right now it's just sort of trendless, mean reverting back to 50%. So for the next few weeks, we'll know for certain, watching this specifically, watch for activity above 47. 50 is going to be a big psychological resistance on the way up as well. And then looking at my favorite punching bag, Zeke BTC, open interest has just been mega long historically since 2019. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, that's a bit weird. It's in this bearish pitchfork. It's been below the cloud. It's been below the 200. It's going to need a lot of activity over the next year or two above 8K sats, above 14K sats, or whatever this is, 014.014. That's the current upside resistance for the pitchfork. So the pitchfork is just a channel with certain rules. It's got anchor points here, and then it draws the channel. And ideally, it just stays along this median line or attempts to return to it over and over and over again. So you can see it'll get above, it'll get below, but it'll ultimately come back to the median line unless it breaks the channel. So right now it's above the 200, it's above the cloud. It's at the median line of the pitchfork. It's above the VPVR congestion zone. It's above this 8-month consolidation. It actually looks pretty decent as far as getting to the upside of the bearish channel. I still think overall it's going to be bearish. I think it's going to have a hell of a time between 8.008 and 0.014 to actually find any bullish momentum. But it's really the most bullish it's looked since existence, just based on being above the 200 and above the cloud. So if it can get above 0.006, whatever this level is here, above this median line, I'd certainly look at 0.008, 0.014, that sort of thing for the upside. And then there's no bullish or bearish divergences here. It is on the overbought territory in RSI. So I'd look for